The sun was setting over the alien planet Lithera, casting a golden glow over the palace that towered like a jewel above the city. Princess Alara walked through the grand halls, her silver robes brushing softly against the polished floor. Every corner of the palace shimmered with alien technology, and exotic plants from distant worlds grew in floating gardens. Yet despite the beauty surrounding her, Alara's heart was heavy. It had been a day of scandal. The council had summoned her angry and stern because she had questioned one of their ancient decrees. For a princess to challenge tradition was considered a betrayal of the royal family, no matter her intentions. Alara had spoken only to protect her people from an unfair rule, but in the eyes of the council, her defiance could not be tolerated. You must face the consequences. Princess, said Chancellor Virak, his voice echoing in the marble hall, your punishment is unusual. You are to marry a human. Alara froze, her eyes widening. A human? She repeated as if hearing the word aloud might make it vanish. Yes, the Chancellor replied firmly. A human from Earth. He has been chosen not for rank, not for wealth, but for his survival skills, intelligence, and ability to adapt. You will marry him as a demonstration of obedience to the Council. Alara's mind spun. Humans were considered a lesser species by many on Lithera. They were admired for some traits like courage and adaptability, but they were not equal to the advanced beings of her world. To be forced into marriage with one felt like a humiliation, a mark on her pride. And I have no choice? She asked, her voice sharp. None, said the Chancellor. This is the law. The union is not only binding, but will serve as an example to all who question the Council. Alara turned away, anger boiling within her. She stormed through the palace corridors, her robes flowing behind her. How could this happen? She had been careful, smart, loyal, but somehow it was not enough. And now she was to be forced into marriage with a human she did not even know. Meanwhile, on Earth, Captain Ethan Carter was finishing a routine exploration mission. He had traveled to distant planets for months, studying unknown species and mapping terrain. He was a skilled and respected explorer, known for his intelligence and ability to stay calm in dangerous situations. Yet nothing in his life had prepared him for this moment. A message had arrived from Lithera, unexpected and urgent. He had been chosen by the Alien Council to marry Princess Alara. The word seemed unreal. He was a human, just one among billions. And suddenly he was being told he must travel across space to become the husband of a princess on a distant planet. He stared at the message for a long time, trying to understand if it was a prank. But the authority of the Litheran Council left no doubt. There was no option for refusal. He would go, not as a conqueror, not as a hero, but as a guest bound by the laws of an alien world. The journey to Lithera was long and filled with anticipation. Ethan studied every piece of information he could find about the planet, the royal customs, and the princess. He knew that to survive he would have to respect her culture, even if he did not fully understand it. When Ethan's ship finally landed on Lithera, the palace loomed like a mountain of glass and metal. He stepped out feeling both awe and unease. The guards looked at him curiously, whispering to each other in the alien language. He was not just a visitor. He was part of a law that had never been tested before, an alliance between human and princess. Inside the palace, Alara waited in the grand hall, her arms crossed and her gaze sharp. She had heard of humans before, of course, but meeting one face-to-face was something else entirely. When Ethan entered, she could not help but notice his calm presence, the way he moved with confidence and the steady, intelligent look in his eyes. He bowed slightly, respecting her position, and said, Princess Alara, I am Captain Ethan Carter. I understand this. Arrangement is unexpected, but I am here to fulfill the Council's decree. Alara's lips pressed into a thin line. You do not understand, she said coldly. You are not a ruler here. You are human, you are beneath this world, and yet the Council expects me to marry you. Do you know how humiliating this is? Ethan did not flinch. I do not wish to humiliate you, he said calmly. I am here to obey their law, nothing more. I do not know you, Princess, and I have no desire to impose on you. But I will do my part to respect your customs. Alara studied him carefully. His voice was steady and his demeanor unshakable. She felt a flicker of something unexpected. Curiosity, perhaps, or maybe the faint recognition that this human was not like the others she had heard about. He was intelligent, aware, and unafraid. For the first few days, the palace was tense. Alara avoided Ethan whenever possible, attending her royal duties with precision and coldness. Ethan moved quietly, learning the ways of the palace, the routines of the staff, and the habits of the princess. He observed without judgment and found ways to help subtly, removing obstacles, preparing for ceremonies, and offering insight when problems arose. Despite her pride, Alara could not deny that his presence made some tasks easier. And though she would never admit it aloud, she found herself studying him, noticing how he adapted quickly to Lytheran technology, how he approached problems logically, and how he remained calm even when palace staff whispered doubts about him. It was during a tour of the palace's floating gardens that the first real conversation happened. Alara walked ahead, her hands brushing the petals of glowing alien flowers while Ethan followed silently. Finally, she spoke. "Why do you care about our customs?" she asked. "You do not belong here. You are human. You could leave if you wanted." Ethan looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I could leave," he said. "But the law brought me here, and since I am here, I choose to understand. I cannot change the past, princess, but I can respect the present. That is all I can do." Alara blinked, surprised by the simplicity and honesty of his answer. Most humans she had heard about would either challenge or mock her, not speak with calm reason. Something about him was different, and she could not deny it. Days turned into weeks, and the palace began to feel less like a cage and more like a place of learning, for both of them. Alara continued to perform her royal duties, but she now included Ethan in discussions when decisions involved both of their perspectives. He listened carefully, asked questions respectfully, and offered insights that even the council began to notice. One evening, after a long day of palace meetings, they found themselves alone in the palace observatory. The twin moons of Lythra hung low in the sky, casting silver light across the room. Alara looked at Ethan, her usual sharp gaze softening slightly. "You are different from what I expected," she said quietly. Ethan smiled faintly. "I hope that is good different, not bad different," he replied. She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Perhaps it is," she admitted. "You are patient, intelligent, and not afraid to speak your mind. Humans are rarely like that in my experience." Ethan's eyes twinkled. "And Lytherans are rarely so honest about their feelings," he said gently. "We both have things to learn." For the first time, Alara felt a flicker of hope. The marriage she had once seen as a punishment might not be as unbearable as she had feared. Perhaps in time she and Ethan could find a way to respect each other, and maybe more. That night, as she lay in her chambers, Alara reflected on the past days. The human was not her enemy. He was not there to humiliate her or take her freedom. He was simply there calmly, steadily, proving his worth through actions and honesty. For the first time since the council's decree, she felt something she had not expected: curiosity and a cautious sense of trust. The path ahead would not be easy. Lythra's council was watching closely. Palace politics were as complex as ever, and the expectations of her people weighed heavily on her shoulders. Yet with Ethan by her side, she felt a small spark of possibility. Perhaps this human who had come into her life as a punishment might teach her more than she had ever learned before. Perhaps this strange forced marriage could lead to a future she had never imagined, a future not dictated by punishment, but by discovery, understanding, and even hope. And so the first chapter of their story ended not with conflict but with cautious beginnings. A princess forced into marriage, and a human thrust into a world beyond imagination. Neither knew what the future held, but both were beginning to see that perhaps this unusual pairing could change not only their lives, but the fate of their worlds. Days passed in the palace, and life began to settle into a cautious routine. Princess Alara and Captain Ethan Carter moved through the ornate halls of Lythra with an uneasy balance. The palace was alive with whispers of curiosity, some admiring the human, others questioning his place beside a princess. Alara, still proud and wary, maintained a formal distance. Yet behind her carefully controlled expression, she found herself noticing Ethan more and more. Ethan, for his part, was determined to understand the culture of Lythra. He studied the palace rituals, the traditions of the council, and the strange customs of the people. Every day brought new lessons, some humorous, some serious, but he approached each challenge with patience and observation. He realized that the key to survival was not to fight the customs, but to respect them while quietly adapting. Their first major challenge came when the palace received troubling news. A group of rebel Litherans had attempted to infiltrate the city's outer defenses. Though their motives were political, the attempt had endangered not only the royal family but the lives of many citizens. The council demanded immediate action, and Alara was called to help devise a plan to prevent future attacks. Alara was frustrated. She had never faced a crisis of this magnitude alone, and the council's expectations weighed heavily on her. Yet as she prepared her reports and strategies, she noticed Ethan quietly reviewing maps and suggesting alternative plans. His input was subtle but insightful. "You could fortify the East Corridor," Ethan said one evening, pointing to a section of the city layout. "It seems the rebels have studied the main gates carefully. If we strengthen this area, it may force them to reconsider." Alara raised an eyebrow. "You think like a tactician," she said, a hint of surprise in her voice. "Most humans would panic or retreat." Ethan smiled faintly. "Panic rarely helps," he replied. "Observation and preparation do." Though she did not admit it aloud, Alara found herself appreciating his calm perspective. The council, however, was not as forgiving. They watched Ethan closely, skeptical of a human influencing royal decisions. Alara sensed their judgment and knew she had to protect both him and the city. The next day, a meeting was held with the council in a grand chamber that shimmered with alien light. Alara presented the plans she and Ethan had reviewed together. The council members scrutinized her, their expressions hard and critical. "This human," said one counselor, his voice sharp, "speaks too boldly for his station. Is it appropriate for him to advise the princess?" Alara met his gaze steadily. "Captain Carter has proven his insight," she said firmly. "His observations are based on logic and experience. Ignoring them would be unwise." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Ethan remained composed, standing quietly beside Alara, offering no arguments, only the presence of calm assurance. Some council members were still unconvinced, but others began to see the truth in her words. In the following days, Alara and Ethan worked together to strengthen the palace defenses. They inspected walls, observed patrol routines, and implemented strategies that blended Litheran technology with human ingenuity. Slowly, the princess began to see the value of their partnership. Yet it was not just the palace that challenged them. Alara's personal feelings were becoming harder to ignore. She found herself noticing small things about Ethan: the way he handled unexpected situations, the way he listened when she spoke, and the way he respected her space even as he offered advice. There was a quiet patience in him, a kindness that contrasted with the rigid expectations of Litheran society. One evening, as they walked through the floating gardens, Alara spoke softly. "Do you ever wish you could return to Earth?" she asked, watching the glowing plants drift in midair. Ethan looked at the garden thoughtfully. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I also believe that challenges teach us more than comfort ever could. And being here, I am learning things I never expected." Alara glanced at him. There was honesty in his voice that was difficult to resist. She did not know if she could trust him fully yet, but she felt a growing respect. Perhaps, she thought, humans were not as limited as her people often claimed. Their growing connection was tested when another threat emerged. A neighboring planet, jealous of Lithera's technological advancements, had begun sending spies disguised as traitors. These spies tried to infiltrate the palace under the guise of diplomacy. It was Ethan who first noticed inconsistencies in the records of visitors. He pointed out small details that suggested deception. Alara, initially skeptical, followed his observations. Together, they uncovered the intruders before any harm could be done. The council was impressed, though still cautious. Alara felt a small sense of pride. Not only had she proven her capability, but Ethan's intelligence had saved the palace once again. "You are helpful," she said later, almost shyly, as they reviewed the events in a private chamber. Ethan gave a small smile. "I aim to be," he replied. "And your decisions were critical. I only observed where I could." Alara found herself smiling, a rare moment of warmth breaking through her usual composure. The partnership that had begun as forced and unwelcome was slowly transforming into something productive, even enjoyable. As they spent more time together, Alara began to share aspects of her life that she had kept private. She told Ethan about the responsibilities of being a princess, the expectations placed on her, and the struggles she had faced while growing up in a world of rigid rules. Ethan listened without judgment, asking questions that showed he truly wanted to understand. "I never imagined a human could care so much about another world," Alara admitted one evening. "You treat this place as if it belongs to you, yet you respect it completely." Ethan shrugged gently. "Every world has value," he said, "even ones that seem strange at first. And I have learned that respecting others is more important than trying to control them." Alara considered his words, feeling a strange warmth in her chest. She realized that she was beginning to enjoy his company, not just tolerate it. There was something grounding about him, a steadiness that calmed her restless mind. The palace staff began to notice changes as well. Alara, once cold and distant, was more willing to consult Ethan. Some whispered that the princess had grown fond of him, though no one dared speak such rumors aloud. Ethan, meanwhile, remained humble and focused, never seeking praise or attention, only quietly assisting where he could. One afternoon, during a routine inspection of the palace defenses, Alara and Ethan encountered a technical problem, with the energy barriers protecting the outer walls. While the technicians struggled, Ethan calmly analyzed the situation and suggested a solution that integrated both Lytheran and human technology. Alara hesitated at first, unsure if the humans' method would work. But when she saw the results, the barriers strengthening and responding faster than before, she could not hide her astonishment. "You are remarkable," she said softly, almost to herself. Ethan glanced at her, his expression neutral but kind. "We both did it," he said. "You approved the plan and I suggested adjustments. It was teamwork." Alara nodded, feeling a mix of pride and unexpected admiration. She realized that the human beside her was not only intelligent and capable, but also respectful and patient, a combination she had rarely encountered among her own people. That night, as the twin moons of Lythera cast silver light across the palace, Alara found herself reflecting on the past weeks. What had begun as a punishment, a forced marriage to a human she did not respect, was slowly transforming. She had seen courage, intelligence, and kindness in Ethan that she could not ignore. She had begun to trust him, and in small ways she had begun to enjoy his presence. For the first time, the idea of their marriage did not feel like humiliation. Instead, it was an opportunity to learn, to grow, and perhaps to find companionship in a world that had always demanded perfection from her. Alara did not yet know what the future held. The council was still watching. The political climate remained tense, and the expectations of her people were ever present. But she felt something she had not felt in a long time: hope. And perhaps, she thought quietly, she was beginning to see that even a punishment could hold unexpected gifts. As she prepared for rest, Alara glanced out of her window at the glowing city below. She could feel Ethan's presence in the palace, calm and steady, like a silent promise that they could face whatever came next together. And so, part 2 of their story ended not with victory or defeat, but with growth and understanding. The princess and the human, once strangers bound by decree, were slowly forming a partnership built on respect, trust, and the first sparks of mutual admiration. The challenges ahead would test them further, but for now, they had begun a journey that neither had anticipated, and it was only just beginning. The days in the palace grew busier as Princess Alara and Captain Ethan Carter settled into their unusual partnership. Though their marriage had begun as a decree from the council, it was slowly evolving into something far more complex. Respect and curiosity had grown between them, but now they faced a new challenge: diplomacy. Lythera was surrounded by neighboring planets, each with its own ambitions and secrets. The council had arranged a series of diplomatic meetings to maintain alliances, and Alara, as the princess, was expected to participate actively. Ethan, as her human husband, was included, much to the surprise and skepticism of many ambassadors. The first meeting was with the delegation from Viridia, a technologically advanced planet known for its strict trade policies. The Viridians were cautious, formal, and proud, and their representatives did not hide their disbelief that a human had a seat beside the princess. Alara entered the chamber with poise, her silver robe shimmering under the ambient lighting. Ethan followed, careful to respect her space while observing every detail. As the discussions began, Alara noticed subtle exchanges of glances and whispers among the Viridians. They were curious about Ethan, and some seemed to underestimate his understanding of their customs. "Princess Alara," said one Viridian diplomat, his voice smooth but tinged with skepticism, "I must ask, why involve a human in these negotiations? Surely it is unusual for someone of his kind to understand our ways." Alara met his gaze steadily. "Captain Carter is not merely human," she said. "He brings a perspective that complements my own. Underestimating him would be unwise." Ethan remained quiet, observing the delegation, but he noted every gesture, every subtle cue. When Alara's attention wavered, he whispered a suggestion to her, pointing out the likely intentions behind the diplomat's words. She listened, appreciating the insight he provided. Together they navigated the complex discussion, countering subtle manipulations and finding solutions that pleased both parties. By the end of the meeting, several diplomats exchanged private nods of approval. Ethan's intelligence and calm reasoning had not only helped Alara, but had also impressed those who had doubted him. Alara noticed a small smile tugging at his lips, and for the first time, she felt a sense of pride, not in herself alone, but in their teamwork. Back in the palace, the success of the meeting was celebrated quietly among the staff. Alara and Ethan took a rare moment to walk through the palace gardens, away from the prying eyes of courtiers and advisors. The gardens were alive with floating blossoms and exotic scents, creating a serene environment for reflection. "You handled that well," Alara said softly, her usual formal tone replaced with something warmer. "Most humans would have been lost or overwhelmed," Ethan shrugged. "I had a good teacher," he replied, glancing at her. "You're patient, observant, and willing to listen. That makes all the difference." Alara felt a flutter of something she could not quite name. It was a mix of admiration, curiosity, and perhaps a growing affection. She reminded herself that he was still human, still an outsider, and yet she could not ignore the way his presence had begun to matter to her. As the days passed, palace life brought both challenges and unexpected lessons. Alara and Ethan were assigned to oversee a festival celebrating Lytheran culture, an event that required meticulous planning and coordination. The festival involved displays of art, music, and technology, each element reflecting the ingenuity of Lythera. Ethan approached the task with enthusiasm, learning about the customs while offering practical solutions to potential problems. Alara found herself enjoying his company more openly, laughing at his occasional misunderstandings of the alien traditions, and appreciating his ability to adapt quickly. During the festival, they faced a minor crisis. A malfunction in the floating light displays threatened to ruin the evening's main event. Panic spread among the organizers, but Ethan remained calm. He suggested a way to reroute the energy flows, combining human problem-solving with Lytheran technology. Alara followed his guidance, coordinating the adjustments with precision. The lights responded beautifully, illuminating the palace gardens in a dazzling display. Guests and dignitaries were impressed, and the festival continued without further incident. Alara, watching the celebration unfold, felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had begun to trust Ethan completely, relying on his intellect and judgment in ways she had never anticipated. As night fell, the palace quieted, and the two walked through the gardens once more. The twin moons reflected in the water, creating a serene atmosphere. Alara spoke quietly, almost to herself. "I never imagined a human could be so capable," she said. Ethan looked at her, his expression gentle. "And I never imagined a world like this," he replied. "You've shown me kindness, patience, and trust. That is more than I could have hoped for." For a moment they walked in silence, each lost in thought. The distance between them, once so defined by duty and decree, was beginning to shrink. Alara realized that the human beside her was no longer just a partner in name. He was becoming someone she could rely on, someone she could respect, and perhaps someone she could trust with more than just palace duties. The next challenge came from within the palace itself. Some members of the Royal Council had begun to voice concerns about the growing influence of a human in their politics. They questioned Alara's judgment, suggesting that relying on Ethan might weaken her position. Alara faced a dilemma. She knew she could not ignore the Council's concerns, Yet she also understood that Ethan's presence was not a threat, but an asset. She decided to confront the issue directly, summoning the council to a private meeting. "You have raised concerns about Captain Carter," she began, her voice steady. "I understand your hesitation, but he has proven his value through action, not words. Underestimating him would be a mistake that could cost this palace dearly." The council murmured, some nodding reluctantly, others still skeptical. "He is human," one counselor said, voice tight with disapproval. "We are Litherans. How can we trust his judgment in our affairs?" Alara's gaze was firm. "Trust is earned, not given based on species or birthright," she said.
"He has earned mine, and in doing so has helped protect this palace and our people."
"I will not allow prejudice to cloud judgment when lives are at stake." The room fell silent. Slowly, some council members nodded, acknowledging her point. Ethan stood quietly beside her, not seeking credit but supportive in his presence. Alara realized that he had become more than just a human assigned by decree. He was now a partner she could rely on in matters of state. Later that evening, Alara and Ethan shared a quiet dinner in a private chamber. The palace staff had left them alone, allowing a rare moment of peace. Alara found herself reflecting on the events of the day, on the way they had handled challenges together, and on the subtle shift in their relationship. "You have changed my perspective," she said quietly. "I expected this marriage to be a burden, a punishment, but now I see it differently." Ethan looked at her, his expression calm but kind. "I am glad to hear that," he said softly. "I never wished to impose or disrupt your life, but perhaps together, we can make it better than either of us imagined." Alara felt warmth in her chest, a feeling she had not allowed herself to recognize before. She realized that she was beginning to enjoy his company, not just tolerate it. She was beginning to value his presence, his insight, and his steady support. The night passed quietly, with the palace sleeping under the glow of the twin moons. Alara lay in her chambers, reflecting on how far she had come in such a short time. What had begun as a punishment was slowly turning into a partnership, one built on trust, respect, and understanding. She could not yet define her feelings, but she sensed that something important was growing between them. As dawn approached, she looked out of her window at the city below. The streets were quiet, the gardens bathed in soft light, and the palace stood as a symbol of both tradition and change. Alara realized that she was no longer the same princess who had resisted the council's decree. She had begun to learn, to adapt, and to see the human beside her not as a burden but as a companion, and perhaps something more. And so, part 3 of their story ended with growth and understanding. The challenges of diplomacy, palace intrigue, and cultural differences had tested them both, yet they had emerged stronger, more confident, and more connected. The princess and the human were no longer merely bound by law. They were beginning to see each other as equals, capable partners, and trusted allies in a world that demanded strength, wisdom, and courage. The journey ahead would still hold surprises, dangers, and lessons, but for the first time, Alara felt a quiet excitement for what was to come. She and Ethan were learning that even the most unexpected partnerships could bring strength, joy, and hope in ways neither had anticipated. The festival of Lithera had ended and the palace had returned to its usual rhythm, but something within Princess Alara had changed. The experiences with Captain Ethan Carter, the challenges they had faced, and the successes they had shared had stirred something new inside her, a sense of curiosity, openness, and even enjoyment. What had begun as punishment was slowly transforming into discovery. Alara spent her mornings overseeing the palace and afternoons in the gardens, sometimes accompanied by Ethan. He had begun to learn the nuances of Litheran traditions, and she in turn had begun to appreciate his perspective. There was a sense of harmony developing, an unspoken understanding that they were learning from each other. One morning, the council summoned Alara for a meeting regarding the upcoming cultural exchange with a distant planet, Orville. Representatives from Orville would visit Lithera to observe their technology, arts, and customs. The council expected the princess to host the visitors and manage their impressions carefully. "You will be accompanied by Captain Carter," Chancellor Virek said, his tone serious. "He has proven useful. Your coordination will be observed closely." Alara nodded, though she felt a flutter of nervousness. Hosting visitors was one thing. Navigating the expectations of both her people and aliens was another. She knew she could rely on Ethan, yet the task was daunting. During the preparations, Ethan displayed remarkable attention to detail. He suggested scheduling events to highlight Lithera's strengths, while allowing space for interaction between visitors and locals. Alara noticed how his suggestions balanced diplomacy with practicality, showing sensitivity to both cultural pride and interpersonal engagement. As the Orville delegation arrived, Alara and Ethan greeted them in the Grand Hall, the palace shimmering with elegant lights and floating gardens. The visitors were curious, polite, and eager to explore, but also cautious, testing every aspect of the Litheran culture. Ethan quietly observed the delegation, noting their reactions and gestures. He whispered suggestions to Alara, helping her respond to subtle cues without undermining her authority. Together, they navigated each meeting, each display, each performance. The human beside her, once a stranger and a supposed punishment, had become indispensable. During the first evening of the exchange, Alara and Ethan walked through the palace gardens, observing the delegation interact with the floating flora. The air was filled with the scent of alien blossoms, and soft lights from hovering orbs reflected in the crystal fountains. "You are doing well," Ethan said quietly, glancing at her. "They are impressed, though cautious." "Your calm presence makes a difference," Alara smiled faintly. "I couldn't do it without you," she admitted. "I thought this would be difficult, but with your perspective it feels manageable. Even enjoyable in a strange way." Ethan's expression softened. "I am glad. It is easier when we work together." The festival had allowed Alara to experience something new: joy in collaboration, trust in companionship, and the pleasure of sharing her culture with outsiders without fear of judgment. She realized that her initial resentment toward Ethan had faded, replaced by a sense of appreciation. The next day, they led the delegation to the Palace Observatory, where Lithera's technological marvels were displayed. Ethan demonstrated an understanding of the devices, explaining some functions in ways even the Litherans appreciated. Alara watched him, feeling a subtle thrill of pride. He had begun to blend human ingenuity with Litheran innovation, creating something unique and impressive. Later, they shared a quiet meal in a private chamber. The day had been long, filled with formalities and expectations, yet there was a moment of peace. Alara looked at Ethan, noticing the gentle confidence in his posture, the attentive way he listened, and the calm expression that had become familiar and reassuring. "I never thought I would enjoy this," she said softly, "sharing our culture, guiding visitors. It feels lighter when you are beside me." Ethan nodded. Partnership changes the experience. Challenges seem less overwhelming when faced together. Alara felt a warmth in her chest. She had begun to see him not just as a companion in duty, but as someone whose presence brought comfort and even pleasure. She allowed herself a small smile, realizing that she looked forward to these moments of collaboration and quiet conversation. The following days were filled with further engagements. Alara and Ethan hosted artistic exhibitions, scientific demonstrations, and cultural performances. Each event brought new opportunities for them to work together, and Alara found herself enjoying the process more than she had expected. She laughed at Ethan's occasional misunderstandings of Litheran expressions, admired his patience with the customs, and began to see the humor in situations she once would have found stressful. One evening, after a particularly successful demonstration of Litheran technology, Alara and Ethan took a walk along the palace terraces. The city below glimmered under the light of twin moons, and the soft wind carried the scent of alien blossoms. Alara spoke quietly, as if sharing a secret with the night. "Do you ever think, perhaps this marriage, which I once considered a punishment, could become something else?" she asked, her voice tentative. Ethan looked at her, understanding the depth of her words. "I believe it already has," he said gently. "We have both learned from each other. That is more than many partners ever achieve. And perhaps it is the beginning of something meaningful." Alara considered his words, feeling a thrill of hope. She realized that she had begun to find pleasure in their partnership, not just in the successes, but in the companionship, the shared challenges, and the moments of understanding. She felt lighter, freer, and even more confident in herself. The council, noticing the success of the Orville delegation, praised Alara for her leadership and diplomacy. Yet she knew that the true success was not in the approval of others, but in the bond she had formed with Ethan. His intelligence, calmness, and respect had transformed her perception of humans and taught her that trust and cooperation could bring unexpected joy. One afternoon, as they oversaw a training exercise for palace guards, Alara found herself laughing at Ethan's unconventional approach to problem-solving. He had suggested a method that combined human strategy with Litheran techniques, and though it seemed unusual at first, it had proven effective. "You think too differently," she said with a playful tone. "But it works," Ethan smiled. "Different is not always wrong," he replied. "Sometimes it is exactly what is needed." Alara felt a warmth in her chest, realizing that she had come to value his insight and perspective more than she could have imagined. She began to see him as more than a partner in duty, more than a companion assigned by decree. He was someone who challenged her, supported her, and made her life brighter. That night, the palace was quiet. Alara walked to the observatory alone, gazing at the stars above. She reflected on the past weeks, the challenges they had faced, the lessons learned, and the growing sense of connection with Ethan. She realized that what had begun as a punishment was now a journey of discovery, growth, and even joy. Ethan joined her, silent at first, sharing the view of the stars. They stood side by side, a quiet understanding passing between them. "You have changed my world," Alara said softly. "I never imagined I could find pleasure in any of this. But now I do." Ethan looked at her, his eyes calm and kind. "And you have changed mine," he replied. "You have shown me patience, trust, and understanding. That is more than I could have hoped for." For a long moment they stood together, gazing at the stars, feeling the quiet connection that had grown between them. Alara realized that she was beginning to embrace her life on Lithera, not as a punishment, but as an opportunity for growth, discovery, and the pleasure of companionship. The next morning, the council brought another challenge, an unexpected inspection of the palace's defenses and technological systems. Alara and Ethan faced the task together, combining her royal knowledge with his practical experience. Once again, they succeeded, strengthening the palace and impressing the council. Alara realized that with Ethan, even challenges that seemed daunting could become manageable and even enjoyable. She found herself looking forward to their shared efforts, their conversations, and the quiet moments of understanding that had become precious to her. As the day ended, Alara reflected on how far she had come. What had begun as a forced marriage, a punishment for defying tradition, had transformed into a journey of trust, cooperation, and discovery. She had begun to find pleasure in their partnership, not just in victories or accomplishments, but in the simple presence of someone who respected her, supported her, and challenged her in the best ways. And so, Part 4 concluded with Alara fully embracing the joy of their companionship. The forced marriage that had once seemed unbearable was now a source of growth, learning, and even delight. She had begun to see that life, even when dictated by rules and tradition, could bring unexpected happiness when shared with the right person. The princess and the human were no longer bound by duty alone. They were united by understanding, respect, and the beginnings of a deep, meaningful connection. The journey ahead promised further challenges, lessons, and discoveries, but Alara faced it with confidence, hope, and a quiet sense of pleasure in the partnership she had once resisted. The palace had never felt quieter, yet never more alive. Princess Alara walked through the corridors with a sense of purpose she had not felt weeks before. The experiences she had shared with Captain Ethan Carter, diplomacy, defense, festivals, and quiet moments had transformed her understanding of herself, her people, and the human beside her. Ethan met her in the grand hall, his presence calm and steady as always. Together they had faced challenges that tested their patience, intelligence, and resolve, and each time they had emerged stronger. Now the council had called a final meeting to review the state of the palace, its defenses, and the progress of their diplomatic relationships. It was the last official test before the humans and Litherans could truly see that their partnership was successful. As Alara entered the chamber, she noticed the council members' expressions. Some were still cautious, their skepticism lingering, but others displayed signs of approval, admiration even, for the cooperation she and Ethan had demonstrated. "You have accomplished much," Chancellor Virek said, his voice steady. The Council recognizes the effectiveness of your joint leadership. The palace stands stronger, our allies more confident, and our people safer than ever." Alara nodded, glancing at Ethan, who remained quietly supportive at her side. She realized how much she relied on him, not just for guidance but for the quiet strength he provided, the steady confidence that balanced her own intensity. "This success is not mine alone," Alara said. "Captain Carter's insight, patience, and careful observations have been critical to every decision. Without his presence, many of these accomplishments would not have been possible." Some council members shifted in surprise, but the weight of her words was undeniable. Ethan's calm presence, intelligence, and respect had proven themselves through action, and even the skeptics could not deny it. After the council meeting, Alara and Ethan walked through the palace gardens. The air was filled with the scents of alien flowers, and the soft lights from hovering orbs reflected in the water of the fountains. Alara felt a sense of peace she had not known before. The palace, the people, and even the human beside her, all had become sources of unexpected strength and comfort. "I never imagined," Alara said quietly, "that what began as a punishment could become such a gift." Ethan looked at her, understanding her meaning. "Life often surprises us," he said gently. "The challenges we face sometimes lead to opportunities we never anticipated, and I am grateful to face them with you." Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest. The human who had once seemed like a burden now stood as her companion, her partner, and someone she could trust completely. She realized that the bond between them had grown stronger than either decree or expectation. It had become a connection rooted in respect, understanding, and shared experience. The next days were filled with final preparations for a grand ceremony, honoring the successful completion of the cultural exchange and the strengthened palace defenses. Ambassadors from across the neighboring planets arrived, bringing gifts, art, and technologies to celebrate Lithera's leadership and ingenuity. Alara and Ethan moved through the ceremonies together, coordinating with grace and subtle humor. Guests were impressed by their seamless cooperation, the human and the princess working as equals, embodying the unity and strength of their partnership. During a quiet moment in the celebration, Alara found herself beside Ethan on a terrace overlooking the city. The twin moons reflected in the crystal fountains, and the soft light illuminated their faces. She spoke softly, almost shyly. "Ethan, I want you to know that I value you, not just as a partner in duty, but as someone important to me." Ethan turned to her, his expression calm, yet warm. "Alara, I feel the same," he said. "I came here unsure of what to expect, but with you I have learned, grown, and found trust and companionship I never anticipated." Alara felt a flutter of emotion she could not name. It was relief, joy, and hope all at once. She realized that she had grown to enjoy his presence, his calm wisdom, and the way he respected her yet offered guidance. He had become someone she could rely on completely. The ceremony began, and Alara and Ethan stood before the assembled dignitaries. Gifts were exchanged, speeches were delivered, and praises offered. Yet in the midst of the formalities, Alara's thoughts returned to Ethan. He had become more than a human assigned by decree. He was her partner, her ally, and now in ways she could not fully explain, a source of joy and pleasure in her life. As the night deepened, the palace gardens were lit with soft illumination, and the sounds of celebration drifted through the air. Alara and Ethan walked together, talking quietly, laughing softly at minor mishaps during the ceremonies, and observing the beauty of their surroundings. "You have changed my perspective," Alara said. "I once believed this marriage was a punishment, something to endure. But now, I see it differently. I see the value in partnership, in trust, in companionship, and I find joy in it." Ethan's eyes reflected the soft light. "I am glad," he said. "Partnership, respect, and trust can turn even challenges into opportunities for happiness. And I have learned that with you." Alara smiled, feeling a sense of contentment she had never known. The human beside her, once an unexpected assignment, had become a true companion. She realized that the lessons they had learned together, patience, understanding, and cooperation, had led to something far greater than she had imagined. The days that followed were filled with continued work, shared responsibilities, and quiet moments of reflection. Alara discovered the pleasure in small things. Walking beside Ethan in the gardens, sharing a quiet meal, discussing palace affairs, or observing the city from the terraces. Each moment reinforced the connection that had grown between them, a bond based on mutual respect, trust, and shared experience. One afternoon, they visited the palace observatory, gazing at the stars above Lithera. Alara leaned slightly on Ethan's shoulder, feeling the calm stability he offered. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked softly. Ethan looked at the stars, thoughtful. "I do," he said. "I think about the challenges we may face, the people we will help, and the ways we will continue to grow together. And I am confident that whatever comes, we will face it side by side." Alara felt a thrill of hope. She realized that she had begun to envision a life not defined by decree, punishment, or obligation, but by choice, partnership, and even joy. She had discovered that trust, respect, and companionship could turn unexpected circumstances into meaningful experiences. In the weeks that followed, the palace settled into a steady rhythm. Alara continued her leadership, guiding her people with wisdom and grace, while Ethan provided insight, support, and calm reasoning. Their partnership had become a model of cooperation, earning admiration from citizens, council members, and foreign dignitaries alike. Alara realized that what had once been a punishment, a forced marriage, had become a source of unexpected growth and happiness. She had found pleasure in their shared experiences, in the trust they had built, and in the companionship that had developed naturally over time. One evening, as the palace slept, Alara and Ethan walked through the gardens once more. The soft glow of the floating lights reflected in the fountains, and the scent of alien blossoms filled the air. They spoke quietly of future plans, upcoming challenges, and the possibilities that lay ahead. "I never imagined I could find such joy," Alara said, her voice soft but steady. "I feared this marriage, but now I see it as a gift, a chance to learn, to grow, and to find companionship I never expected." Ethan smiled, his eyes reflecting the light of the moons. "And I am grateful," he said, "for the opportunity to learn from you, to work with you, and to share in this journey. You have changed my life in ways I never imagined." Alara felt warmth and happiness spread through her chest. She realized that the journey they had undertaken together, from reluctance and uncertainty to trust, respect, and joy, was a testament to the power of partnership, understanding, and shared experience. The palace, the people, and even the human beside her had taught her lessons she could never have learned alone. She had discovered that what seemed like a punishment could become a source of strength, learning and pleasure when approached with an open heart and mind. And so, as the twin moons of Lithera cast their gentle light over the city, Princess Alara and Captain Ethan Carter stood together, not as a princess and a human forced into a marriage, but as partners, friends, and companions who had discovered the unexpected joys of trust, respect, and shared life. Their journey had begun with a decree, but it had grown into something far greater, a bond built on understanding, a partnership strengthened by challenges, and the quiet pleasure of companionship that neither could have anticipated. The story of the princess and the human had reached a new beginning, one filled with hope, trust, and the promise of shared adventures yet to come. Together they had turned punishment into possibility, duty into discovery, and expectation into joy. And in that moment, under the light of twin moons, Alara realized something she had once believed impossible. She had found happiness, partnership, and pleasure in a world she had once feared, and in the human she had once resisted.